Have you ever seen photos and videos of women going gorgeously gray and thought to yourself, I want to go gray too? Well, don't do it. At least not if you can't handle these 6 things. I've been blogging about gray hair since 2018, and I have supported countless women on their gray hair journeys since then. And one thing I've learned is that if you can't handle these 6 things, there's a very good chance that you might actually hate the whole process of going gray, and you might even, dare I say it, hate your gray hair once it grows in. And we don't want that to happen, do we? Forewarned is forearmed, so let's dive right in. The first thing you need to be able to handle is probably one of the most aggravating aspects of going gray. Now, it doesn't happen to everybody, but it's especially common here in the United States, and that is negative comments and pushback from hairstylists, family, friends, and even coworkers, and sometimes even strangers. You would not believe some of the things that women have shared with me. One woman wrote to me that her husband told her he did not want her to go gray because he didn't want to sit down at his dining room table and see an old hag sitting across from him. I have a friend who works at a major media company, and one day one of her female coworkers tried to press money into her hands because when she saw her gray roots, she naturally assumed that my friend was too poor to get her hair done. I myself had to deal with a hairstylist who would not help me transition to gray hair because it would make me look old, and sadly that's not an uncommon attitude. Now, if you're hearing all this and you're feeling a little skeptical that this is actually a thing, I polled my readers this week on Facebook and my viewers on YouTube, and I asked them to share with me the most ignorant comments that they have received about their gray hair transition or their gray hair after it's grown out, and I'm going to share them here with you now because this is absolutely something that happens to many women. It doesn't happen to everybody, it happens to a lot of us. The negative comments and feedback seem to happen more often to women who are considered too young by society to let their hair go gray. But it can happen to women of all ages. It's happened to me, and it's happened to many of my friends, and it might even happen to you. If you can, plan some witty comebacks and keep them at the ready, because those kind of negative comments can come out of nowhere, take you by surprise, and derail your transition to gray hair, no matter how initially enthusiastic you were about doing it. And remember why you're going gray. If you can be confident in your choice and your decision to go gray, then those kind of comments can roll off your back, and it will make it much easier to continue along your merry way through your whole entire transition. Going gray from dyed hair is not exactly what I would call easy. First, you need to make the decision to go gray, and that's a big leap for a lot of us because there is so much prejudice in our culture against it. Then you have to decide how to go gray, which method of going gray appeals to you. I have a lot of info on my blog and on my YouTube channel about that, but even then you got to give it some thought. It's not something you can just decide in 5 seconds. You need to research it and see which method suits your temperament. And no matter which method of going gray you choose, you'll probably encounter some pitfalls, as every single method of going gray has its pros and cons. For example, are you going gray cold turkey? Well, for some women, they have a really hard time with the skunk stripe, with the phase where your hair is calico, and the sheer length of time it takes to go gray cold turkey, depending on your hair length. Are you going gray with a pixie cut? Some women find it very aggravating to grow out their pixie cut into medium length or long hair if that's what they want to do. Are you going gray with a buzz cut? Well, many women find it empowering and liberating and they love it, but a lot of women find that it's shocking to them. They don't like the way their head shape looks, or they just don't like the way they look with super short hair, and then they have to grow it out. Are you going gray at the salon? Well, a lot of people have great success with that, but some women end up with damage, and some women end up having to spend a lot of money going back to the salon over and over again for routine maintenance, and that can get very expensive. Now, I don't want you to get me wrong. None of these things might happen to you, and for a lot of us, even if they did happen, it was worth it to eventually have our gray hair grown out, and so we were able to get through all those pitfalls because we could see the light at the end of the tunnel and we knew it's what we wanted. But it helps to have patience, a sense of humor, and to be resilient. If you have all 3 of those qualities, or even just 1 or 2 of them, you will find the transition to gray hair so much easier. But if you don't, that can be very difficult, and when people have a difficult transition, sometimes they just head back to the dye, despite all the reasons they wanted to go gray in the first place. Just a quick note, I want to hear from you. If you have already gone gray, would you please do me a favor and head on down to the comment section below and let me know which method you used and how it worked out for you. If you had any pitfalls or any regrets, or if it all went smoothly, I want to know. You would be doing me and your fellow Silver Sisters or future Silver Sisters a great service. Thank you so much. How do you deal with uncertainty? Because you're going to have to deal with a lot of uncertainty during your gray hair transition. Why? Well, because there are two major things that you cannot predict about your gray hair: the color and the pattern. Despite what your hairdresser might have told you, you cannot predict what your gray hair will look like while you still have dyed hair on your head. It's impossible because the dyed hair reflects off of your translucent hair and it muddies your perception of the color. You might look at your roots and predict that your hair is going to be silver and discover to your surprise that it's actually a lovely champagne color. And as I mentioned earlier, you also can't predict the pattern. Some women like me have a lot of silver hair on the top layers, and underneath our hair is actually still pretty dark. A lot of women have grayer hair in the front and darker hair in the back, but sometimes it's reversed. Some women think that they're going to be gray all over, but when they grow their hair out, they find out that only these money pieces are silver or gray or white. And some women are surprised to discover that their hair is completely white with no pattern at all. Now, for a lot of women, the unpredictability is part of the fun. It's like slowly unwrapping a present, and then you get to see at the end what your present is actually going to look like. But for people who don't like unpredictability, that might be something difficult to get through. Just roll with it and remember why you are going gray in the first place. That should help get you through the roughest parts of your transition. Before we move on to the next section of the video, I just want to ask you a favor. If you like this content, if you find it helpful, fun, or informative, will you please hit the like button and subscribe? It really helps me and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. One of the best parts about going gray is no longer having to spend hours at the hair salon or at home dyeing your hair or touching up your gray roots. I can honestly say it's heaven. I love it. However, that does not mean gray hair is no maintenance. Gray hair requires its own special maintenance to help it look its best. The major maintenance issue with gray hair that you may have heard me discuss on this channel before is yellowing. It won't happen to everyone, but it does happen to a lot of people. I could do a whole video dedicated just to the subject of yellowing prevention, and I probably will do one in the future. But in the meantime, here's just a few of the things that you need to do to protect your gray hair from yellowing. Number one, use a thermal protectant every single time you use a hot tool of any variety. Number two, buy a hot tool that has a low heat or no heat button. Now, these tend to be more expensive if you want the ones that go low enough to be used on gray hair. For me, it's worth it. For some people, it's definitely not. Number three, wear a hat or use an SPF every single time you go out in the sun. Number four, give up smoking, which you should probably do anyway, but especially if you want your hair to look great. Number five, going to go swimming in a chlorinated pool? Well, first you need to wet your hair, put a little oil in it, like Quicksilver hair oil, and then go in the pool. Now, yellowing does happen more often to women with fine gray hair, but it's just something to be aware of until you know what your gray hair texture is like and how it responds to these environmental and other factors. You also have to be cautious with products when you have gray hair. Certain products can stain your gray hair. For example, amber colored products can sometimes leave a yellow stain on your gray hair. And you also have to be careful with ingredients. I am not the expert on that subject, but my friend Jolie Campbell is, and I'm going to put a link to her article on the subject in the video description box. Even with all that being said, I still find that gray hair is lower maintenance than dyed hair. You just need to take the time to figure out what works for your particular gray hair. Patience is key. You need patience to get through this. Now, hearing all of this that I've shared with you today, some of you might think, oh my God, going gray sounds like a nightmare. Well, believe me, it's not. A lot of us find that none of the stuff I've mentioned in this video bothered us at all. We love our gray hair and we loved going gray. But I do think it's important to be honest about some of the pitfalls, because I do hear from women in my email who say that some of this stuff drives them nuts and they weren't prepared. And I don't want you to be like I was when I gave birth to my first child. Nobody was honest with me about the pain. And I went into natural childbirth and the pain was unbearable. I'm still glad I did it. I did not do it with my second one. But I think that we need to discuss these things. I hope you do too. Now, speaking of pitfalls and deal breakers, I just want to mention that you'll definitely want to stay till the end of this video to hear number 6, which is what I would say the biggest deal breaker of them all, and the number one deal breaker that sends women back to the dye. But don't worry, I will also link to a video at the end of this video that will keep you from letting that deal breaker send you back to the dye if you don't want to go back to. Okay, let me ask you, do you hate change? Because you are going to have to deal with a lot of change during your transition to gray hair. And I'm not talking about your hair color. I'm talking about everything else. Not only will you find that some of your favorite hair products no longer work for you, but some of your favorite colors will no longer work for you. I'm talking clothing colors and makeup colors. For some of us, switching out our colors is fun. We like experimenting. We don't mind throwing out the stuff that no longer works for us. But for a lot of you, it's not fun and you'd rather have things stay the same. And you can let them stay the same, but it might bug you. So it's up to you. You have to know your temperament. And speaking of changes, going going gray can also be an emotional roller coaster. If you're used to being on an even keel, you might find that going gray brings up a lot of emotions, some of them good and some of them bad. One day you might feel excited and inspired and empowered and rebellious by going gray. And when you're having a bad day, another day, you might feel like, oh God, I've made a terrible mistake. What am I doing? If you can roll with the changes, if you can go with the flow, as my cousin Stella used to say, this part of going gray will go easier for you and it will help you have a better time. Now we've come to the last section of our video. This is the one aspect of going gray that many women find difficult to deal with. If you can guess what it is, let me know in the comments below, but definitely make sure to come back so we can see if you guessed correctly. Are you someone who values being mistaken for being younger than your age? Well, I hate to tell you, that might change once you go gray. It's not that you don't look good. I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you will. It's just that 75% of the population dyes their hair, and this has created a false assumption that if you have gray hair, you must be old. Now, we all know that's not true. Perceptions have changed a lot, even in just the past 5 years. But there's still a very good chance that somebody somewhere is going to put their foot in their mouth and look at your hair color, not your face, and just assume that you are older than you are. And to be perfectly honest, since we all grew up with this idea that gray hair is for older people, we sometimes look in the mirror and worry that having gray hair makes us look older. It takes a while to get over that. And that really bothers some women. They really feel like the fear of looking older is going to keep them dyeing their hair until they're in their 90s. Now, if that's a fear that bothers you, if you're afraid that going gray will make you look older or that people will say things about it, make sure to stick around and watch my next video all about how not to look old with gray hair. It will address all of your fears. It'll help give you tips and tricks to look your best with gray hair at any age and at any stage. Hope you enjoy it, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button. Thanks so much.